We used to make so many ships. We don't make them anymore very much, but we're going to make them very fast, very soon.
That is Donald Trump talking about reviving the U.S. shipbuilding industry. Well, he can kiss that plan goodbye because his harsh policies just disrupted a key component needed for the U.S. military-industrial complex. Buckle up because China's holding all the cards. The U.S. Air Force and Boeing are staring down a nightmare. China could cut off titanium, the metal that powers production of F-35 fighter jets and 787 Dreamliners. Without titanium, production stops cold. Jets don't fly, planes don't get built, and America's military and aerospace industries grind to a halt. China controls 35% of the world's titanium supply, and they're not just sitting on it. They're weaponizing it. Beijing's already choked off rare earth minerals to flex their muscle, and titanium's next. Why? Because the US is heavily dependent on China, leaving it dangerously exposed. Interestingly, Japan is the only US ally that can help resolve this supply issue a little bit. But guess what? Trump is currently punishing Japan with tariffs, so how is Japan supposed to help the US when they are being treated badly? This isn't just about jets. Titanium is the backbone of high-tech robots, medical devices, and even nuclear plants. If China slams the door shut, the US dreams of bringing manufacturing back home collapse.
It is hitting our defense industry, our semiconductor industry, our automotive industry, our medical industry. There's really no major industry that is being spared the impact of it.
Boeing could lose billions, the Air Force could lose its edge, and NATO's strength could crumble. Meanwhile, China is playing chess while Trump is stuck playing checkers. Do you know what makes it worse? The US has no quick fix, and even dependence on other countries is not possible because they are also tied to China's supply chain too. Stick around as we dive into this crisis and expose how China is outsmarting Washington at every turn. But first, like and subscribe, then let's get into the details. Before we go deep, let me explain why the US is doomed if the government does not find a way to resolve this titanium shortage from China. Titanium isn't just another metal. It's one of the most important metals for advanced technologies, which developed nations like the United States cannot do without. There is simply no modern industry without it. This is a metal that is stronger than steel, lighter than aluminum, and resistant to corrosion. It is the go-to material for anything that demands performance under pressure. The F-35 Lightning II fighter jet program, the pride of the US Air Force and the most expensive aviation project in history, is estimated to cost $1.7 trillion. Each jet is made of about 40% titanium by weight, from the airframe to the engine. Boeing's 787 Dreamliner, each plane packs tons of titanium for landing gear, engines, and critical components. The demand is so high that just last year, Boeing was involved with a massive scandal involving buying counterfeit titanium when they could not get enough supply from China. Now imagine how desperate they will be with China restricting supply even further. Submarines, missiles, body armor, and even high-tech robots rely on it. Without titanium, these industries don't just slow down, they stop dead. Here's the gut punch. The US produces less than 5% of the world's titanium supply. According to the International Titanium Association, America imports 85% of its titanium needs, with China supplying a massive chunk. China controls 35% of global titanium production, 210,000 metric tons annually, while Russia and Kazakhstan chip in another 30%. Together, these three countries dominate 65% of the market, leaving the US at their mercy. The Pentagon, Boeing, and even robotics giants like Boston Dynamics are hooked on foreign titanium, and China's ready to pull the plug. What makes the situation worse for the US is the realization that China is catching up in some military technology. So the Pentagon is trying to quickly upgrade its fighter jets and naval ships to keep up with China's rapid military advancements. President Donald Trump is intensely focused on this challenge, determined to ensure the US stays ahead in air and sea power. China is closing the gap, building advanced fighter jets and expanding its navy faster than anyone else. To counter this, the US is relying on Boeing to create its next-generation fighter jets. However, a major problem looms. The US depends on China for key materials like titanium, which is essential for building these weapons. This sets up a tense rivalry between two powers, one with all the resources it needs and another struggling to secure supplies. The U.S. Air Force is working on a major project called the Next Generation Air Dominance NGAD program, which centers on a new sixth-generation fighter jet called the Boeing F-35. On March 21, 2025, Trump announced that Boeing secured a $3.5 billion contract to develop this jet, which will eventually replace the older F-22 Raptor. The F-47 is designed to be a game-changer, with cutting-edge stealth technology, a powerful new engine, and the ability to team up with unmanned drones called collaborative combat aircraft. These drones will help the jet operate in dangerous areas, especially against China's advanced fighters, like the Chengdu J-36 and Shenyang J-50, which are already being tested. The F-47's design builds on lessons from earlier programs like the F-35 and B-21, using digital tools to lower costs and speed up production. Boeing's contract could grow to over $20 billion for the full development and manufacturing phase, a change from past approaches to avoid the budget problems seen in previous projects. At the same time, the U.S. Navy is moving forward with its F/A-XX program to replace older jets like the Boeing Super Hornet and EA-18G Growler. This new carrier-based stealth fighter, expected to be ready in the 2030s, is likely to be built by Boeing or Northrop Grumman, though a final decision is still held up by funding disputes. The F/A-20 is crucial because China's anti-ship missiles can now threaten U.S. aircraft carriers from over 1,000 miles away, while current Navy jets like the F-35C can only fly about 650 miles into combat. The new jet will feature advanced sensors, artificial intelligence, and drone integration to remain effective in high-risk regions like the Indo-Pacific, where China's Navy is growing stronger. The biggest obstacle to these plans is the U.S.'s reliance on titanium. In April 2025, China tightened its export limits on titanium and other key minerals, raising concerns in the U.S. defense industry. Without enough titanium, programs like the NGAD and F/A-XX could face delays and higher costs. The U.S. has some titanium sources, like the Mountain Pass mine in California, but it lacks the ability to process it on a large scale, and building that capacity could take years. The U.S. is looking to countries like Australia and Canada for alternative supplies, but their contributions are still small. Recycling titanium from old equipment is another option, but it's not yet efficient or affordable. In contrast, China faces no such problems. Its shipbuilding industry, the largest in the world, produces advanced aircraft carriers and other vessels at an impressive rate without needing foreign materials. This is why Trump is demanding $30 billion to compete with China's shipbuilding. China's control over titanium and other minerals allows it to keep building its navy and advanced fighters, like the J-50, designed for sea operations, without any interruptions. The U.S. can't directly stop China from making these weapons, but China's grip on critical resources gives it the power to slow down U.S. efforts through export restrictions. This creates a clear divide between the two rivals. China has the resources to fuel its military growth, while the U.S. must navigate a complicated global supply chain to build its next-generation jets and ships. To tackle this, the U.S. is investing in domestic mining and exploring partnerships with allies like Australia and Canada. However, these solutions will take time in a race where every moment counts. For the U.S. to stay ahead, it must not only develop advanced technology like the F-47 and F/A-20, but also secure the materials needed to make them real. If it fails, China's resource advantage could shift the balance in this high-stakes competition. China's iron grip on titanium. China didn't stumble into this power. It built it. Beijing's Biot Group, now the world's largest titanium producer, churns out aerospace-grade titanium sponge, the raw material essential for modern defense and aerospace systems. Since 2018, China has tripled its output, jumping from 37% to a commanding 66% of global capacity. Meanwhile, the U.S. has let its domestic production wither. Timet's Nevada plant, once a key source, has been idle since 2020. The Pentagon's titanium stockpile? It might last 12 to 18 months in a crisis, nowhere near enough to sustain programs like the F-35 or next-generation fighter jets. China has signaled it may repeat the same strategy it used with rare earths, cutting off exports to punish Washington. And titanium could be next. Why? Because Beijing understands exactly where the West is vulnerable. As previously discussed, Boeing is especially exposed. With nearly half of its titanium sourced from China and Russia, even a partial supply cut could stall production for years. According to Reuters, Boeing was already dealing with falsified titanium documentation from Chinese suppliers in 2024, raising serious concerns about quality control. If China fully shuts the tap, Boeing wouldn't just face delays. It could see its entire supply chain unravel. This crisis isn't just about a single metal. It's about control. China has played the long game, using its Belt and Road Initiative to secure key resources. In Mozambique, for example, China now controls 70% of titanium mines. The Moma mine alone exports 90% of its output directly to China, according to African Business Magazine. But China's dominance doesn't stop at mining. Chinese state firms like the China National Nuclear Corporation oversee large parts of global refining capacity. So even if the West finds untapped reserves, Beijing still holds the keys. So can the US break free from this supply trap? Realistically, not anytime soon. Domestic mining in places like Utah and Colorado looks promising, but environmental regulations and massive startup costs mean these sites are at least a decade away from producing at scale. Recycling isn't a silver bullet either. According to Titanium Metals Corporation, only about 5% of global titanium scrap is reused because the process is costly and complex. And the Pentagon's stockpile? Just a temporary patch. What about international help? Japan, home to Toho Titanium and producing 15% of the world's titanium sponge, might seem like a natural fallback. But its supply chain still leans heavily on Chinese raw materials. To make matters worse, Trump's 10% tariffs on Japanese imports, as reported by Aviation Week, have driven prices up by 40%, effectively cutting off the US from its closest and most viable ally. Australia and India have some reserves, but they don't come close to China's 210,000 metric tons of output. African mines, like those in South Africa and Kenya, seem promising, until you realize China has already locked up many of them through long-term deals and is still acquiring more. If China moves decisively, the impact will be enormous. A global titanium shortage could add $10 billion annually to infrastructure costs. Boeing could lose up to $5 billion a year in delays. And the already staggering $1.7 trillion lifecycle cost of the F-35 could soar even higher. More concerning is the strategic fallout. In the Indo-Pacific, where China is expanding its naval footprint, a titanium crunch could erode the US military edge. The Pentagon warned in 2024 that NATO's long-term strength could be compromised if titanium supplies are disrupted for too long. By controlling this vital material, China is rewriting the rules of global industry. The Made in China 2025 plan isn't only about innovation, it's about dominance. If Western firms can't build aircraft, robots, or next-gen tech without Chinese titanium, they're forced to play by Beijing's rules. Companies like ABB and Yaskawa already rely on Chinese components. A titanium ban would only tighten that grip. The irony is hard to ignore. For decades, the US embraced globalization to cut costs, only to hand China control over its most strategic supply chains. Sanctions on Russian titanium were supposed to punish Moscow. Instead, they deepened dependence on Beijing. In fact, Airbus's CEO warned back in 2022 that losing Russian titanium could trigger a supply crisis even worse than the chip shortage. If China joins in, there's no plan B. The West's aerospace, defense, and robotics sectors could be brought to their knees. And Trump's trade war is pouring fuel on the fire. His tariffs, intended to pressure China, have backfired, pushing allies like Japan away and cornering the US even further. So who's left to bail the US out? Realistically, no one. Domestic mines are years from operational. Japan is constrained by tariffs and China's grip on inputs. The Pentagon's stockpile is temporary. The US now faces a national security crisis born not only of external pressure, but internal policy failures. If you want to stay updated on this development and other geopolitical issues, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. See you in the next one.